So students, welcome back. Today we are just going to discuss the hormonal control of the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. Male reproductive system means what? The testes and other secondary structures like epididymis, vasa differentia, vasa efferentia, other glands, prostate gland, Cowper's gland, seminal vesicle. So all these structures are going to develop. How and how are these being influenced? Their development is being regulated. How? That is we are just going to discuss today. So the development and the growth and functioning of all these structures are depending upon the certain hormones. So that is what we are just saying. This is a hormonal regulation of the male reproductive system. So what we are going to discuss today? We are just going to discuss today how these structures, whether it is testis or whether it is a reproductive duct or whether it is an accessory reproductive gland. So how these structures are going to be influenced for their function, for their structure, for their development. So that is what the complete process is depending upon the certain hormone. So what we are just going to discuss, the growth and development of primary and secondary sexual organs. Growth and development of primary and secondary sexual organ. And remember, the growth and development of these primary and secondary sexual organs are depending upon certain hormones. So always remember, the growth of whether testes or other secondary structures or other the glands are depending upon the particular hormones. So like that, if we are just discussing or if we are just going to divide or differentiate between the reproductive structures in the human male, so there are two types of reproductive structures. One is primary structure, second one is the secondary structures. So primary structures are always regulated by the FSH and ICSH or LH. The primary structures are always regulated by FSH or FSH and ICSH or LH. Seminiferous tubules are the primary structures. Leydig cells are the primary structures because they are present there inside the testis only. So seminiferous tubules and the interstitial cells of Leydig are regulated by two hormones. Those are released by the pituitary gland. How they are being regulated? They are being regulated or intermediated by two hormones, that is called as FSH and ICSH or LH. They are the pituitary hormones. So these two structures, the testis, basically we can say the testis is being regulated or controlled by the FSH and ICSH. The secondary structure means what? Whatever the reproductive ducts are there, vasa efferentia, epididymis, vas deferens, urethra. Then the glands like prostate gland, seminal vesicle, vulvourethral gland or Cowper's gland. All these glands are being regulated with the help of some hormone that is called as testosterone. So if you remember, the testosterone is being released by the released by the interstitial cells of the Leydig. So is it clear to you all? The seminiferous tubule and the Leydig cells are being regulated by the FSH and ICSH or LH, while the secondary sexual structures are being regulated by the testosterone released by the Leydig cell only. So how these hormones are going to influence the development and the maturation of the male reproductive system, the growth of male reproductive system, just try to understand. Here I am just going to discuss each and everything with the help of this flowchart and diagram. My dear student, this type of question is being asked there in 2011 and 12 CBSE examination, and from that time it is being a part of the NEET examination also. So here you have to find out any step is missing or so which step is there. Sometimes they are just asking the labeling of this diagram. Suppose GnRH is there, so they may provide you a blank space and find out what kind of the hormone is present there. If they are just going to find out provide a blank space here and you need to find out this one, so likewise that. So I am just going to discuss you the hypothalamus, the structure which is going to release out the GnRH. Remember, one by one we are just discussing everything. Hypothalamus is the structure, is the part of brain. If you have remember, the brain have diencephalon. The bottom portion of the diencephalon is called as hypothalamus, and hypothalamus is the structure which is regulating the function of pituitary. So hypothalamus is going to release out one hormone that is called as GnRH. Remember, GnRH, gonadotrophin. Gonadotrophin releasing hormone. So gonadotrophin releasing hormone means the hormones which are going to stimulate the gonads are called as gonadotrophin. So gonadotrophin means the hormones which are stimulating the gonads, they are called as gonadotrophin. So hypothalamus is going to release a factor that is called as gonadotrophin release hormone. So this factor is going to work upon the anterior lobe of the pituitary. Are you getting my point? First of all, what happened? The hypothalamus is there. So hypothalamus is going to release out the GnRH, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, which works onto the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. In term of that effect, the anterior lobe of pituitary gland release two types of hormone. As earlier also we have seen, the two types of hormones are required, that is FSH and ICSH. So two types of hormones are being released by the anterior lobe of pituitary. One is called as ICSH and or LH, and second one is FSH. FSH is what? Follicle stimulating hormone. What is FSH? Follicle stimulating hormone. It works on the development of the follicles and the spermatogenesis. So in case of female, it works on the development and maturation of the Graafian follicle, and here in case of the male, it is working on the direct process of the spermatogenesis. Second one, ICSH, interstitial cells stimulating hormone. So you know it's very well in the testis. What is the interstitial cell? The Leydig cell is the interstitial cell. So this is going to stimulate the interstitial cells of Leydig or LH, luteinizing hormone. So ICSH, LH and FSH. So FSH is going to work on the Sertoli cell and ICSH is going to work on the Leydig cells. Are you getting my point? Hypothalamus release GnRH. Under the influence of GnRH, anterior pituitary will release two hormone. One is ICSH, another one is called as FSH. FSH will work on the Sertoli cells and ICSH will work on the Leydig cell. So is it clear to you all? So what will happen when FSH is working on the Sertoli cell? So that is going to promote two type of the processes. The first one is that the Sertoli cell under the influence of FSH is going to release out the ABP. ABP, if you have remembered, ABP is androgen binding protein that is going to accumulate inside the lumen of the seminiferous tubule and bind or associate with the androgen or testosterone, and in term of that, the testosterone influence the process of spermatogenesis. Are you getting my point? FSH is going to attack on the Sertoli cell. Now the Sertoli cell will release out ABP, androgen binding protein. Due to the androgen binding protein, it is the testosterone is getting accumulated into the lumen of the seminiferous tubule and will promote the spermatogenesis. And when the certain level of spermatogenesis is exceeded, when the approximate the maximum level of the spermatogenesis is achieved, means what? The excess level of spermatogenesis is achieved. So you knows very well, the Sertoli cell is going to release the another factor that is called as inhibin. Are you getting my point? Sertoli cell, first of all, under the influence of FSH will work to release out the ABP. Due to the ABP, accumulation of testosterone will reach to the maximum level of the spermatogenesis. When excess level of spermatogenesis is achieved, so that time the Sertoli cell itself release what? The inhibin. If you remember, during the function of Sertoli cell, we have seen the function of inhibin also. Inhibin is an antagonistic hormone to the FSH. Antagonistic means what? You know well. Antagonistic means what? The hormone which is working against the previous one. So they are the against the inhibin work against the FSH. So what happens? The Sertoli cell release ABP, maximum spermatogenesis. Then on the condition of maximum spermatogenesis, the Sertoli cell itself release one hormone that is called as inhibin. Now this inhibin is going to attack back onto the hypothalamus or directly onto the pituitary. Are you getting my point? This inhibin is now going to attack directly back onto the hypothalamus or directly onto the pituitary. If it is going to attack on the hypothalamus, so you can understand that the hypothalamus will stop releasing the GnRH, and in term of that, if GnRH is not released thereon, so anterior pituitary will not be stimulated to release the FSH and the process of spermatogenesis will block there. Are you getting my point? Or inhibin may directly work on the anterior pituitary. Since it is antagonistic to the FSH, so it will stop the release of the FSH and now the other process will stop thereon. So this process is called as negative feedback mechanism. Here what is going on? Negative feedback, because this process is working to stop the process which is operating in the testis only. So is it clear to you all? Once again we'll come back. Here we are just going to see the next one, that is ICSH or LH. So ICSH, interstitial cell stimulating hormone, or LH, luteinizing hormone. They are just working on interstitial cells. So here in testis, what is interstitial cell? The Leydig cell. So Leydig cells are having only one function, that the function is to release out the male sex hormone, that is called as androgen, and the major component of androgen is called as testosterone. So under the influence of ICSH, the Leydig cell will start releasing out the testosterone, and you knows very well the testosterone is known to develop the secondary sexual organ as well as the development of secondary sexual character. What is the function of testosterone? The development of secondary sexual organ along with the development of secondary sexual character. When a certain level of testosterone is achieved, when extreme level of testosterone is achieved, now the excess level of testosterone itself again hits back the hypothalamus or the anterior lobe of pituitary. Are you getting my point? When the testosterone reaches to its maximum level, then it hits back to the hypothalamus or the anterior pituitary. If it is going to hits back to the hypothalamus, so what will it done? It will stop the release of GnRH. Under the influence of GnRH, if GnRH is not going to be released, so anterior pituitary will not release ICSH. Now Leydig cell will not release testosterone, and the development of secondary sexual organ and character will stop. So is it clear? So here the negative feedback mechanism is there. Here means what? Till the testosterone level is getting maximum height, that time the positive feedback is there. Due to that, the testosterone is getting produced again and again in the much more quantity. But when it reaches to the maximum quantity, then the testosterone itself starts the negative feedback, so that it could stop its own synthesis. Are you getting my point? So this is what the regulation or hormonal regulation of the male reproductive system. So here you have seen how many hormones are involved: ICSH, LH, FSH, ABP, inhibin and testosterone. How they are working? Hypothalamus is stimulating the pituitary gland through the GnRH, and pituitary gland will release FSH, will introduce which stimulate the Sertoli cell to release out ABP. Under the influence of ABP, spermatogenesis will get completed. When spermatogenesis gets at excess level, that time the Sertoli cell itself release out the inhibin, and the inhibin then in turn attack to the hypothalamus to stop the release of GnRH, or it will directly attack onto the pituitary gland so that it could stop the FSH and the process of spermatogenesis will stop. Secondly, here also the ICSH will work on the Leydig cell. The Leydig cell will start releasing testosterone. Testosterone will work on the secondary sexual character and the secondary sexual structure. When it reaches to the maximum level, it will attack back to the hypothalamus, stop GnRH, and anterior pituitary will not release the ICSH, or it may directly work onto the anterior pituitary. In terms of that also, the ICSH cannot be released out and the process will get stopped. So this is what the positive and negative feedback mechanism, positive and negative control of the male reproductive system. So here in between that, this portion is completely the positive mechanism, and here the negative mechanism. The blue color is showing the negative mechanism. Negative mechanism when the process is being stopped, and the positive mechanism when the process has to be continued. So is it clear to you all what is the meaning of positive and negative, how these hormones are going to regulate the male reproductive system? Remember student, that question is very much important, and you may be ready with that kind of the questions because they are just providing a link in between them, and you have to find out whatever is missing. So I don't think now you are having any kind of the problem. Now moving on to some more concept of the male reproductive system. In male reproductive system, first of all, the onset of the puberty. Puberty means what? Puberty is a state of body state of the reproductive structures when they start functioning. Start functioning means they are starting their spermatogenesis. So what is the puberty? Puberty means what? The state when the reproductive organs are become functional, or they are getting functional. So that is occurs, or when the human males are getting the puberty in the age of 13 to 16 year of the age group. So what is puberty? Reproductive organs become functional, they will start spermatogenesis, the secondary sexual character will begin. 13 to 16 year of the age, they will start the puberty sign will express there in 13 to 16 year of the age. How this puberty is being triggered means how this puberty is going to start. That is being triggered by the release of testosterone from the testis. When testis gets functional, so testis interstitial cells of the Leydig are going to release out the testosterone. Under the influence of the testosterone, they are just going to develop the secondary sexual character. And we have discussed a lot the low pitch sound, beard, mustaches, like that all these structures are there that is being considered as the secondary sexual character. So after appearance of the secondary sexual character, we can confirm the onset of the puberty, and at that time also the seminiferous tubules will start functioning and Sertoli cell will start functioning there. So is it clear? So how the onset of puberty is there at the age of 13 to 16 year and under the influence of testosterone, which has been released itself from the testis. Now we are just going to discuss few disorders about the human reproductive system, human male reproductive system. The first disorder is the prostatomegaly. We are discussing in the human males prostatomegaly. Prostatomegaly means prostatic hypertrophy. Prostatic hypertrophy. Prostatic means the prostate gland. Hyper means more, many. Trophy means growth. So when the prostate glands increase in a large size, so that time this is called as prostatic hypertrophy. Prostatic hypertrophy means when size of prostate gland is increased. So that is what the enlargement of the prostate gland is called as prostatomegaly. It is a normal condition after the age of 50-60 years in the human males, but we cannot say that each and every one has to undergo in the process of that. What happens due to the prostatomegaly or prostatic hypertrophy? Due to the increased size or enlargement of the prostate gland, it may block the urethra, and due to the blocking of urethra, you can understand the frequent night urination is being observed in the patient who are suffering from the prostatic hypertrophy. What is there? Due to the enlarged size, that is going to it is going to block the urethral passage. Due to that, the frequent night urination is going to be taking place, and it will a kind of painful urination, we can say. Moving on to the next, that is impotence. That is the reproductive disorder. Impotence means what? The inability of the male to maintain the penile erection and failure in the mating. Sterility is the next one. Sterility means what? Inability of human male sperm to fertilize the egg. What is sterility? When the human sperm or male sperm is not able to fertilize egg, that is called as sterility. And that is we cannot say that sterility is always associated with the impotence. It may be or it may not be associated with the impotence. So is it clear to you all? So that is all that is what all about regarding the control or regulation of the male reproductive system or hormonal regulation of the male reproductive system. Now we are moving toward the regulation of the female reproductive system. So how the hormones are going to regulate the female reproductive system? Remember, the basic concept is similar there in the male and female reproductive system, because the regulation is of what? Primary reproductive structure. In male that was testis, and here in case of the female that is ovary, and secondary reproductive structures are the glands and other structures. So here the process is very much similar, because the complete hormones has to work directly onto the ovary, and ovary has to work everything. And here just try to understand once again, the hypothalamus is the major structure, because it is going to release out some of the factor that is called as GnRH. Already we have just gone through gonadotrophin, means here the gonadotrophin are the hormone which are going to stimulate the ovary. So gonadotrophin releasing hormone, hypothalamus will release the gonadotrophin releasing hormone that will influence the anterior lobe of pituitary, and here LH and FSH, two hormones will be formed. LH and FSH, two hormones will be formed. When LH and FSH are formed, they are attacking on the ovary, and ovary will in turn release out the estrogen and progesterone. Are you getting my point? The very simple process. Under the influence of hypothalamus, the hypothalamus will release out the GnRH, will attack onto the anterior pituitary. Due to that, the anterior pituitary will release LH and FSH here also, but here the target is same, there is no Leydig cell present. So in that case, in male, what happened? The LH is working onto the Leydig cell and FSH is working onto the Sertoli cells, but here only one cell is there, that is ovary. So they both are acting on the ovary, and ovary in turn are going to release two hormones that is called as estrogen and the progesterone. Two hormone that is going to release out, that is called as estrogen and the progesterone. Now what happened? Progesterone and estrogen are continuously helpful in the formation of the follicles, development of the follicles, and the process of fertilization. Remember, but if fertilization process occurs, the fertilization completes, the pregnancy occurs. So at that time, The female will not have the experience of the ovulation. Ovulation means the female will stop or suspend the development of the follicle, and that situation what will happen, the estrogen and progesterone itself give the negative feedback to the hypothalamus or anterior pituitary directly when the pregnancy occur or the fertilization gets complete. On that situation what happen, estrogen and progesterone directly gives the negative feedback to the hypothalamus or the pituitary, so that it could stop the secretion of this FSH and LH and no further release of the follicle will occur. Similarly, estrogen and progesterone. So I'm just going to discuss the role of each and every hormone here. I'm just going to discuss role of each and every hormone. What the FSH does. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. So definitely follicle word is for the ovarian follicle. Ovarian follicle means the primary follicle, secondary follicle, tertiary follicle, Graafian follicle, and inside the primary, secondary, tertiary, Graafian follicle, it is going to introduce or stimulate the development of egg. Are you getting my point? It is not going to stimulate the growth of follicle, but it stimulates the development of the egg inside the follicle also. It also stimulates the release of estrogen. So what is the function of FSH? Stimulate the release of estrogen and growth of ovarian follicle, development of egg inside the follicle. What is the function of LH now? LH is luteinizing hormone. Very important function. Remember, in NEET examination 100 times it has been asked in many of the examination when the state PMTs were there. So that time the question was very much common thereon ki the structure, name the hormone which is responsible for formation of corpus luteum. So remember, corpus luteum is formed by the influence of LH. So LH is responsible for the formation of corpus luteum after the process of fertilization gets complete. If fertilization gets complete, then the Graafian follicle is getting converted in form of corpus luteum, and it will take charge to release out the continuous higher level of the progesterone thereon. So LH is responsible for formation of corpus luteum and release of the progesterone. Since the corpus luteum is being formed, so corpus luteum is working to release out the higher quantity of progesterone thereon. So that is going to involve there in the release of progesterone. One very important thing, on the 14th day of the menstrual cycle, the LH level is going to be higher again. Are you getting my point? On the 14th day of the menstrual cycle, suddenly the level of LH is going to raise. That is going to known as, or the event is known as LH surge. Under the higher level or the peak level of LH, the oocyte is going to release out from the Graafian follicle. That is called as ovulation. So what happened? The LH is responsible for ovulation. These two functions are very important: formation of corpus luteum and the ovulation. Ovulation is under the influence of the LH. Okay, so now moving on to the next hormone. Okay, so estrogen is the next hormone. Estrogen is working for the development of endometrium. I don't think now this is a new term for you. Endometrium is the structure which is present on the uterine wall. The innermost wall of the uterus is called as endometrium. So it is responsible for the development of endometrium. Myometrial hypertrophy, I don't think myometrial word is the new one. The middle layer of the uterus, that is myometrium. So that is responsible for the growth of, the estrogen is responsible for the growth and development of endometrium. And the myometrial hypertrophy means what? Endometrial development means what? Ki during the menstrual cycle, when the complete endometrium is getting sprayed off, so that is going to be regenerated under the influence of estrogen only, and it is also going to provide the stimulus for the myometrial lining to get thickened. So that means estrogen is involved with the thickness of the uterine wall. So that is involved with the thickness of the uterine wall. Next one, progesterone, very important hormone because this is known as the pregnancy hormone. The progesterone is the next hormone. The progesterone is secretory. Progesterone is basically working on the endometrial lining. Progesterone is increasing the secretory behavior of the endometrium. Secretory behavior of endometrium. So endometrium itself release out the progesterone. So progesterone is working on endometrium so that it should release out the progesterone. It increase the adhesive nature of endometrium. Adhesive nature of endometrium means to say it is going to stimulate the adhesive nature of endometrium so that it could receive well the embryo during the process of implantation, it is going to provide the additional strength to the endometrium so that the attachment of embryo should be the proper. That is what it is going to increase the thickness of the endometrial lining. So decrease is the myometrial contraction. If the myometrial contraction is continuously increasing, so you can understand well myometrial contraction, if it is going to increase, so that will create a negative impact over the process of implantation. So under the high level of progesterone, what will happen, there will be reduced contraction of the myometrial lining. Under the high influence or under the high level of progesterone, there will be negative influence on the myometrial contraction, so that the implantation and the attachment of embryo should be proper into the endometrial lining. Finally, it maintains the uterine thickness throughout the pregnancy period. So that is what this is called as pregnancy hormone. If the certain time, if due to any of the reason, if the progesterone level is falls down suddenly, so the endometrial hypertrophy will be there, the endometrial linings will get degenerated. That is what going to abort the fetus thereon. So now we are moving on to the next. After completing the regulation of the female reproductive system with the help of hormones, we have discussed each and every hormone, how the FSH is regulating, how the LH is regulating, how estrogen and progesterone are going to regulating. We are just moving on to the female reproductive systems disorder. What are the major disorders of the female reproductive system? The first disorder of the female reproductive system can be considered as the sterility. What is sterility? Sterility means what? Sometimes the females are not able to conceive. Conceive means they are not able to fertilize, they are not able to implant the embryo, they are not able to give birth to the embryo. There may be many of the reason how they are having, why they are having such kind of the problem. So we'll discuss the detailed problem of the sterility in the further lectures, where we'll find some of the solution also, how the females will undergo in the solution, or how the females will resolve such kind of the sterility problem. Okay, so, but basically due to the abnormal reproductive structure, the inability to conceive is called as sterility. Next one, menstrual irregularity. This is very common into the females. Menstrual irregularity means menstrual cycles is not proper, and menstrual cycle is the basic reproductive physiology of the female. If it is not proper, so the reproductive behavior of the female will get changed, will get altered. So remember, we'll discuss the reproductive physiology. That time we'll discuss the menstrual cycle separately, and that time that will discuss everything in detail. But remember, amenorrhea, when the menstrual bleeding is completely absent; hypermenorrhea, when excess bleeding is there during the menstrual cycle; dysmenorrhea, when the painful bleeding is there, painful menstruation is there; hypomenorrhea, very less bleeding during the menstrual cycle. So all these structures, all these terms are related with the menstrual cycle. So remember, we'll discuss all these terms separately during the menstrual cycle, because menstrual cycle is very important question in your final examination as well as in the NEET examination. A very common problem is associated with the female, that is the breast cancer. I don't think I need to explain the breast cancer. Cancer means a hypertrophy of any of the cell, the increased capacity of division, and due to the increased capacity of division, they will start forming the tumor, and the tumor will produce in the breast region. So that is why it is called as breast cancer, and normally this is being reported after the age of 30, and this is a kind of lifestyle disorder. We'll discuss it later on during the human health and disease. Ovarian cyst. Ovarian cyst, once again, cyst means a kind of fluid filled tumor, so present inside the ovary. So sometimes the fluid filled tumor present inside the ovary, and that is called as ovarian cyst, and this is dangerous at the time of pregnancy if it is going to be burst out. So that can be removed surgically, or some other medicines are available by the ovarian cyst can be removed out. Cervical cancer, once again the cancer means what? Hypertrophy of the cells, the hyperactivity of the cells, the division process, division capacity of the cells increase, and how the cancer occurs in the cervical region. Cervical region, if you have remember, the bottommost region of the uterus is forming the cervix, and cervix is having a cervical canal. Also the cervical cancer is the cancer of the cervical canal, so slow growing cancer of the cervix. So everything is, I think, clear to you all. Once again, I'm just going to repeat what are the regulation what we have completed today. We have completed the regulation of the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. In male reproductive system, we have seen the hypothalamus is going to release out the GnRH, which attacks on the anterior pituitary, will release ICSH and FSH. ICSH and FSH. FSH is working on the Sertoli cell to stimulate the release of ABP. Under the influence of ABP, what will happen? The spermatogenesis, when excess spermatogenesis is there, then Sertoli cell itself releasing out the inhibin, which attacks onto the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary, so that it could stop the release of FSH and stop the process of spermatogenesis. That is the negative feedback mechanism. Secondly, the ICSH or LH cells are going to attack on the Leydig cells. They are going to release out the testosterone. The testosterone is going to produce the secondary sexual character and development of secondary sexual structures. When it is reaching to the maximum level, it will again attack back to the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary, so that it will stop the release of that is once again called as the negative feedback or negative regulation of the male reproductive system. And here also we have seen some of the disorders of the male reproductive system, like prostatomegaly, impotence, sterility. We have observed the cases of puberty also. At the age of 13 to 16 year of the age, the puberty is there in the case of males, and here the reproductive organs become functional. It was triggered, or it is triggered by the level of testosterone, which is being released by the testis itself. In case of female also, what we have seen, the GnRH released by hypothalamus will attack onto the anterior lobe of pituitary, will release out the FSH and LH, that will work onto the ovary. In term of that, ovary will release estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone will continue the process of ovarian development, continue the process of follicular development and the development of secondary sexual character. When they reach to the maximum level, if the fertilization occurs, if the pregnancy retains, so that time this estrogen attacks back to the hypothalamus and stops the releasing of this hormone. That is called as the negative regulation. And we have seen the different the role of different hormone, how the FSH is working. FSH is basically working for the growing or maturing of the Graafian follicle or the follicular development. LH is working for the ovulation and the formation of corpus luteum. Estrogen for the endometrial development and the myometrial hypertrophy. Progesterone is the pregnancy hormone, which is going to work basically on the endometrial lining. And we have seen the reproductive system disorder there in the female, that is sterility, inability to conceive, menstrual irregularity, amenorrhea, hypermenorrhea, dysmenorrhea, hypomenorrhea, breast cancer, ovarian cyst and cervical cancer. All these things we have completed till today. So this is for the today's lecture. Thank you.